Hey guys, what's going on? We're getting very close towards the end of the reveal season, but we've got 8 more cards to look at today, so let's jump into it. First card we got is Mortuary Machine. This is a 5 mana 8/8 mech, like Fel Reaver in the past. After your opponent plays a minion, give it Reborn. So, tempo wise, this is worse than a Fel Reaver. Given something Reborn can be really bad, especially if it's a taunt. If you give a Ziliax Reborn after playing this, you might as well concede, I think. Unless you're running a massive amount of silence effects. Maybe you could even silence this. How good is a 5 mana 8/8 right now? It's pretty decent. I'm not sure this card is good enough with the downside to be played though. You can currently play close to a 5 mana 6/6 in Former Champ. I'd say it's a bit worse in that the 1/1 often gets value traded away or something, and the 5/5 can die to like Militia Commander. But yeah, I mean this giving rush minions Reborn's also really bad. Any taunt is just super annoying to get through. I just don't think this is gonna be played too much. You're gonna get as a warrior off your Omega Assembly sometimes, and you're gonna be forced to play it. Yeah, probably not too good though. Next card we have Shadow of Death. This is a rogue spell, pretty interesting card. 4 mana, choose a minion, shuffle 3 shadows into your deck, summon a copy when drawn. Right, so this is like gang up, but you get the minions summoned as well. On curve, this is pretty awful tempo unless you are really good at RNG. It's going to a lot of the time be 4 mana, do nothing. And it also has the requirement that there's a minion on board worth shuffling. There's a 4 mana 5/2 that shuffles 3 2/2s that when you draw them, they come out with Rush. So this card has to be quite a bit better than that, because that card's not currently seeing any play. So you have to be shuffling way better than 2/2s with Rush, because this doesn't come with a 5/2 body. So you're looking at probably shuffling, 4/4s or better. And it's hard for you as a rogue to have stuck a 4/4 on turn 4. It usually doesn't happen too much. And if your opponent's stuck a 4/4, you could be in a bit of trouble if you're spending your turn doing 4 mana, do nothing onto it. So in terms of on curve plays, it's pretty bad. Rogue used to have a card called Faldore Strider, which is a 4 mana 4/4 that shuffled, I believe, 4/4s into your deck. And that was a pretty good card, but it didn't see too much play outside of decks which had a lot of card draw. This is obviously worse than that card for the most part, outside of like specific combos. What combos might they be? Leroy Jenkins is a huge one. If you play Myra's and then you go Leroy plus this after you've Myra's, you've put a lot of damage into your deck, but in terms of tempo, at least initially, you spent a turn playing Myra's, which costs 5 mana, and then you spent 9 mana doing this, playing your Leroy. I mean, you could use your Leroy to trade and then use the remaining 3 Leroys to go phase or something. That might be enough to survive. The problem I see with that is that this card is fairly useless outside of Myra's. There's plenty of cards in the game right now which are really good if you've played Myra's. We're looking at Toggle Scheme combos, we're looking at Chef Nomi. A lot of these just aren't very good because you don't always draw Myra's. And this card to me seems to suffer way more than the other cards that I just mentioned from the not drawing Myra's effect. You can do some meme combos with this. Combo it with Desert Obelisk as well. Oftentimes that's going to get you at least the 3 available to start this combo. Maybe you get even more of them. You can combo with Mogu Cultist as well, but that seems unnecessary. I think Toggle Scheme is probably a better combo. One thing I will say, however, there are several cards in this set which really push for very strong win conditions after you've Myra's. So if it comes to like specialist format and you're trying to beat control warriors, playing till Myra's suddenly becomes more viable of a strategy. And if you only have to put in a few cards to make that really punishing for the warrior, there might be some merit there. But in terms of like main decks for laddering and stuff, I don't think it's gonna make a huge difference. Next card we have is Bone Wraith. It's a 4-mana 2/5 Taunt Reborn. This card was seen on board when they talked about the Paladin quest, and pretty much people guessed it would be a 4-mana 2/5 Taunt Reborn, and it is. How good is this card? Kind of compare it to Sludge Belcher. Obviously 2 attack is worse than 3, but 4 mana is better than 5. The back end is a bit easier to get through because it's going to have 1 health, but you can sometimes heal it up in classes if you get to do the trade first, or do some other stuff with the body, or sometimes just the 2 attack is better against the opponent's board. I would say that 2 attack on a 4-drop taunt is pretty bad, given that most 3 and 4 drops tend to have 3 or more health. So that you're going to be able to value trade into this fairly frequently. The card's kind of good against lackeys, but outside of that, it's a bit tough to see this being very strong against like 3 drops and stuff like that. Something you might want to run in your Taunt Warrior if you go in that route. A few new cards for the Taunt Warrior archetype. This might be one of them. Is certainly, you know, a decent-ish taunt in the 4-drop slot. There's not much else. There was a 2/6 which had +2 attack if you had no other minions. That was released in the last set, and that was okay. Didn't end up seeing play after a while, but it was experimented with at the start. This might be the same case with this card. It is annoying to get through. I'll give you that. It will slow down decks for sure. So if you're playing at AoEs and things, this might be a card you want in your deck. Has synergy with other things like the Paladin quest. You might have to play this card if you're playing the Paladin quest. I don't think the Paladin quest is going to be very good, but if you are going to try that, you're going to probably play this as well. I think 2 attack on a 4-drop really does suck quite a lot for the most part, and that's going to be the thing that holds it back. It does really badly against Militia Commander as well. 5/5 into a 2/5 goes really well for the Militia Commander, and then you're left with a 2/3 as the Warrior versus a 2/1 afterwards, which is way in your favour. And that's if you don't have like a 1/3 on board, because if you got like a 1/3 on board, they play this and you just Militia Commander it and then trade your 1/3 into the 2/1. You're just so far ahead at that point, which is going to really hurt this card for sure. Next up we have Pharaoh Cat, which is a rogue 1-drop. Battlecry, add a random reborn minion to your hand, 1/2 stats, and a beast. Yeah, this card seems really strong. Right now, there's no real good 1-drop for rogues. Like the best thing is Southsea Deckhand, and you really only run that in a pirate-based rogue deck. You don't really run it in anything else. This card just seems like it's really good, either on turn 1 or as a 1-drop combo of things. You can even like get extra value out of this card if you compare it with Spirit of the Shark, so that's quite cool. Reminds me a little bit of Firefly. Obviously the stats are the same on the first body, and it adds another minion to your hand. I think this is probably weaker on average than the Firefly. As a 1-drop, you want to be playing it in the early game, and this thing can hit so many random expensive cards that the second body doesn't help you a lot. Like if you imagine as a rogue that you have quite a lot of things you want to be doing on like turns 3, 4, etc. So when you're generating cards as well, it's really hard to play anything that isn't cheap. Like if you generate a 4-cost card with this, It's hard to fit it into turns because you're going to be wanting to play the cards that you actually put in your deck because they're going to be stronger. Like you're going to be playing like maybe Henchclan Thugs, you're going to be playing Miscreants, etc., etc., and it's going to be hard to fit in, say, Bone Wraith. I mean, Bone Wraith's probably one of the stronger ones, but like there's some other reborn cards which might be a bit weaker. So if you compare this to a Firefly, the Flame Elemental that you get from Firefly is way easier to fit into turns. You can use the Flame Elemental to combo things with SI, which is really important as well. The way it beats the Flame Elemental is if you are going towards the late game as a rogue. Sometimes you're going to have all the mana available to you and you just need extra value, and this card's going to provide that. I mean, if you look at other card generation effects in the game, Shaman has a 2/2 elemental that adds a random elemental to your hand. They also have a buff effect that adds a random elemental to your hand. And most times, the elemental that you generate is just not going to be played in those games because it's just going to be worse or too expensive than the things you want to generally be doing with your game plan. But even if the card you get from Ferrocat is probably not going to be run, at least for the majority of your early game, I still think this is a good card. It's just a thing you can put on turn 1, or you can play on turn 4 to combo your Miscreants or SIs, etc. And it's going to be just a really solid card. 1/2 stat line is just nice for a card like this. It's worth noting that if you're playing a Burgley style rogue deck, this can sometimes activate your Vendettas because there's already been a couple of reborn class cards, so sometimes you might high roll in that regard if you get like the Paladin or the Priest one. Or if you're playing like Test and stuff, it's pretty nice if you get a class card as well because the card will come back with Test. Next we have Tomb Warden, which is 8 mana, 3/6. Taunt, Battlecry, summon a copy of this minion. How long can this go on? Spiritual successor to Saronite Chain Gang, I guess. Double the cost, and not quite double the stats, but you know, attack scales way better than health does, I'd say. It is a mech, so you're going to see this card regardless, as long as Control Warriors or Bomb Warriors are still a thing, because you're going to see this randomly generated. And it's going to be pretty good a lot of the time when they do. It's very defensive and it's a lot of stats. If you go a Mega Assembly on 10, without any prior play that you want to do, and you get this, it's usually going to be pretty good. You're going to be able to value trade into a lot of things if you have Dr. Boom up with being able to rush this. And it's going to provide some defensive things for your opponent to have to get through. So that seems pretty solid in that regard. Other than that, I don't think you run this in just a normal deck. It is a bit annoying to get through, but it is also a bit expensive for the warrior. They want to sometimes they want to combo like shield slams. Even gaining armor every turn is quite important for them in that regard. Brawls and stuff cost 5, so you want to be able to like do a 4+5 on your turn, etc., etc. And when it comes to 8 cost cards, it can be kind of tough to fit into your turns. Obviously, it's support for Taunt Warrior. If you land the buff on it into the fray, this card, it becomes pretty nice. A couple of 5/8s. If we remember from like Zoo Warlock, when they landed a buff on Saronite Chain Gang via Kelaseth or via Soul Infusion, it was a pretty huge tempo swing. This comes obviously quite a bit later in the game than that, but I think it will still be pretty strong. Like, it's kind of hard to get through 5/8 taunts outside of being a mage with all their giants. This is somewhat resistant to sap in that if they do sap it, there's another 3/6 body on the board already, and you get to maybe replay this on the turn after getting 2 more taunts. I think it's a bit too expensive to be played outside of taunt decks. I mean, it's 8 mana for 12 health of taunt, which is pretty good, honestly. Very defensive. Not a bad card by any means. You're going to find this off this guy as well, actually, quite often. And it's going to be a pretty good pick from it, I'd say. Because like class cards have a higher chance of being discovered. and there's only 3 taunts in Moira, including this card, and the legendary. So if you are playing Frightened Flunky, which I imagine you might do, even outside of taunt Moira decks, you're going to be seeing 2 Warden come up a lot of the time, regardless. So it might just be one of those cards where you don't put it into your deck, but you're going to see it a lot via Omega Assemblies, via taunt generations, etc., etc. Next we have Priest spell, 1 mana, Embalming Ritual, give a minion Reborn. Yeah, this card is pretty much always going to make it into the set. I thought it might be on a Paladin card, to be honest. It seemed to be more of a Paladin effect, I'd say. But it's on the Priest instead. Yeah, pretty boring card. How good is it? I don't think it's very good. It might be run if you're going for your where is it? The Ammit. Where's the Ammit? There it is. High Priest Ammit deck, where you're running the 3 mana 3/3 Sandrudge, which requires you to play a bunch of spells. You might want to be running this card as well, because you can go like Sandrudge and Reborn the Sandrudge, and you get your taunt, and you put sticky stuff on your Sandrudge so you can combo some more other things. Or you can give a minion Reborn, play your Ammit as well, kill off your guy, and it comes back with 7 health. That's something you can do for tempo. Seems okay. I mean, there used to be a Paladin card, I believe, which was 2 mana, and it was like Ancestral Spirit, but the thing came back with 1 health, and it was pretty terrible. It was just basically a worse Ancestral Spirit. This thing's just half the mana cost, which is pretty important. If you're playing Nomi Priest, I don't think you want this card, even though it's somewhat cheap. It's not 0 for 1, so 1 is way more expensive than 0 for sure. And you don't really want to be giving your stuff Reborn. It's not that effective, I'd say. Like, giving Auctioneer Reborn is kind of nice, but most decks have ways to ping it off anyway, so it's not gonna make it that much more sticky. I mean, giving your taunts Reborn's quite nice, actually. If you've got High Priest Ammit on board, you do your taunt, and then you use this card on your taunt, or you use it on the Ammit. It's going to be really hard for your opponent to get through your stuff, to clean up, to stop you snowballing off that board. It's going to be making your stuff real sticky. Outside of these combos, this card just feels like it's too low on value. Like, you're going to run out of stuff playing this, and it really favors you being on board. And as a priest, it's notoriously hard to get onto board. Next card we have Pharaoh's Blessing. Give a minion +4/+4, Divine Shield, and Taunt. Right. This card has been getting a lot of negative publicity, I'd say. A lot of people were saying this is just crap. The devs were saying that this card used to have like lifesteal and maybe like some different stats on it, but it turned out to be like too strong. I can understand that. If they think they had lifesteal as well, it'd be like a 6 mana Ziliax that can go onto everything, and I think that would be probably too strong of a card. But how good is it now? Kind of compare it to Blessing Kings. 2 more mana and you get Divine Shield and Taunt. Obviously, if that wasn't bundled, it's probably not worth the 2 mana, but this is a bundled effect. This is 1 card to give you all of these things. Something this could be good on, that I was just thinking about today, was if we go all the way down and look at Salop's Pride. If you go for the Salop's Pride with Twilight Drakes and Faceless Rages, if that's your deck, you're very consistently going to be hitting a very big Twilight Drake on turn 4. Whether you're on the coin or not on the coin. You're going to be playing on this on turn 3. It's often going to die with 1 health, and then you're going to play a big Twilight Drake, and your opponent, while you're doing that, it's probably gone wide on board, and the big health on your Twilight Drake isn't going to be that useful because it doesn't have taunt. Alright? The opponent's just going to go wide and ignore your Drake and go face, that sort of thing. So you need some kind of way to punish them for that. Something you could do in that sort of deck is Pharaoh's Blessing. You can give your Twilight Drake, which is probably going to be like 9 health or 10 health because of the card you're playing. Now you're playing Christology in that deck as well, which is also going to give you card draw. So your Drake's going to be pretty big. You can coin this card out, or you can go Faceless Rager on turn 5 plus a 2-drop or something, and then this on turn 6. And it's going to provide a very, very defensively big thing for your opponent to get through. And given it's got Divine Shield, you can also kill off their biggest minion whilst you're setting up this really big taunt for them to get through. That is really weak, by the way, to hard removal and silence, doing that sort of curve, which is going to be a bit of a problem. But if the meta becomes a way where there isn't a bunch of silences and things, this kind of paladin deck might be like viable as like a tier 2 or 3 deck. You can also run, I think it's called like Lightforge Blessing, which gives your minions lifesteal. You probably run that in that deck as well because you're going to be putting some big minions onto the board, and if you can give them lifesteal, they're going to require quite a few hits to kill, and they're going to heal you up a lot. So that's also something you can do in that sort of deck. I mean, in terms of what it does, it's kind of like Sunwalker in terms of its stats for 6 mana, but you put it onto a minion. So it kind of has like a charge effect. You make more use out of the Divine Shield because you get to control what you attack, but it does have the requirement of you having to have something on board before you play it, which is kind of why I like it with this Twilight Drake strategy, because they're very likely to survive outside of hard removal and silence because they just have so much health. So yeah, I kind of compare it to Sunwalker, kind of compare it to Argent Commander, because it's got like 4 attack and Divine Shield, and it's kind of like a charge effect because it's a buff. Obviously you can't play on an empty board like Argent Commander, but you have better stats than the Argent Commander, and you can put it onto bigger minions to make use of the taunt as well. Outside of that though, you can maybe run this in a mech deck. It doesn't work with Kangor's Endless Army because it's not a magnetic enchantment, but you can put this on like Mechano Eggs and stuff, like turn 5 egg, and then follow it up with this, and it's kind of like Annoyer Module in that regard, but a bit more expensive, and it doesn't come back with Kangors, so it sounds pretty bad when you talk like that, but you might just want redundancy in that deck and in being able to put taunt on things, so you might want to just run this regardless. Next we have Conjured Mirage. This is 4 mana, 3/10 taunt, huge stat line. At the start of your turn, shuffle this minion into your deck. Right, so if you think about this card, what's going to happen when you play it into opponent's board and they don't have the required damage to get through this? Well, they're just going to not attack. So if you think of it like that, it can be very comparable to a Frost Nova from Mage. They Frost Nova and you can't attack. Play this, you can't attack. I'd say this has a couple of weaknesses over a Frost Nova and a couple of strengths. We'll go through the weaknesses first. First of all, this is very weak to hard removal. If your opponent is running hard removal, they can just use a spell like that, which is probably better to run like hard removals in your deck than it is to run multiple silences, because the way to counter a Frost Nova is silence. But it's pretty hard to like silence more than one of your minions. So like that's why Frost Nova is really hard to counter. A lot of the time they Frost Nova in you, and you can't really do too much. Like all you can do is develop board if you've been smart enough not to fill up your board. But in terms of like silencing your stuff, there's very limited options. But hard removal, there are plenty of options. You only need to you want to run hard removal in your deck regardless, and you only need one real bit of hard removal to remove this. And even if you're running silences, it's pretty good against this as well. Like you just silence this. It's a 3/10 body. It's like quite good stats, but it's probably being run in a deck where they can't make huge use out of it They're just playing this as a defensive tool a lot of the time. You silence it, you trade into whatever they're trying to protect, or you just go face. And it's going to take quite a few turns for this to trade into the necessary stuff to regain the tempo. Also, Frost Nova is a really strong card in the Conjuring Mage mirror. They play a bunch of giants, fill up their board with Khadgar Conjurers or whatever, and then you Frost Nova it, and they don't get to attack with any of them, and maybe they can't even develop their board as well because they can't trade off any of their smaller things because they're frozen. So they're going to waste extra tempo that way because not only can they not attack with their minions now, they can't spend their mana on developing the board as efficiently as they would like. This card here, it doesn't offer those same protections. It's pretty easy for like giants to get through this. They only need 2 extra damage on it, and then they've got through. So it could be a case where they do have the required amount of board to trade into this and go face afterwards. If you have a big wide board, which is usually the boards where you do want to Frost Nova them, they might have the required attack to kill this, but if they don't, they can trade off their 1/1s, their rubbish things, and they still have board space to develop onto the board after doing so. This is also more expensive than a Frost Nova. It's not a spell either, so doesn't have synergies with Sorcerer's Apprentice or Mana Cyclone. So yeah, strengths for this card, it is anti-fatigue. If you are going for that strategy, there are going to be some scenarios where either you get to play multiple copies of this because it's going to go into your deck, or in the late game, maybe you've somehow run out of your opponent out of removal, and you're just going to get to play one of these every turn. I do believe that it will shuffle itself before you draw a card, so you won't fatigue at all as long as you have this without it getting silenced or killed. But if that becomes a thing, Control Warrior is just going to save their Omega Devastator to kill it, and then you're going to be back to fatiguing, or they're going to generate another Omega Devastator, and the anti-fatigue aspect of this is just not really that viable because any control deck will have a way to deal 10 damage from hand, whether it be a silence, whether it be minions on board, or it will be just, hard removal. Another aspect of Frost Nova is that it's only really good when it's paired with high tempo situations or combos. Historically in the past, you've seen it in Freeze Mage because they want to just get towards their win condition, their combo. They don't care about the board that much. They want to kill you with their combos and things. Like Antonida's Frost Nova is a very powerful turn because they can't kill the Tony, then you're just going to die to the fireballs, and whatever you have on board doesn't really matter. Conjuring Mage, right now, they can do something like Giant Frost Nova, and if you can't get through the Giant, they're just threatening a big Conjurer's Calling turn. So say they go Giant Frost Nova, you don't kill the Giant, then they just go Khadgar Conjuring, well, the game's over then. It's a bit harder for other decks, which, outside of Mage, they don't have these high tempo swings or these threats available to them. If you play this card, it's more expensive than Nova, and there isn't too many combos from other decks that are as threatening as what Mage can do right now. It's possible like you want this in like a control Shaman or a control Warlock deck. It's a nice thing. 4 mana, at least heal 10. You can use this to stall for your Earthquake, or you can use this to stall in Warlock for a Plague of Flames. Say you're building up a farm scheme and you need it to be a bit bigger. You can maybe play this card and then do your combo the turn afterwards. Something like that. Yeah, thanks for watching. Not too many card reveals until we get the final dump now. So yeah, excited to see all the new cards. See you next time.